IVM.
Hi, I'm Zarina Poonawalla, your peak performance coach, life coach, emotional intelligence practitioner, and NLP practitioner. I'm also the founder of Abzo Expertise Unique, and my organization constantly aims at building leaders across continents. After having worked with so many dynamic business honchos, entrepreneurs, startups, CEOs, management gurus, parents, and student communities worldwide, I am convinced that every individual has unleashed potential. And all we really need to do is realize it. Watch the magic unfold, enhance quality of life, relationships, and professions. On my show, be ready for some riveting conversations with inspirational people, snippets, stories, and much more. So here I am on this exceptional journey to find empowerment and inspiration anywhere I can. Come join me on this breathtaking path of self-realization, potential maximization, positivity, and most of all, embrace your inner power. You are on your way to empowering yourselves. Welcome to the Empowering Series with Zarina Poonawalla. Hello and welcome to the Empowering Series with me, Zarina. On today's episode, I'm in conversation with a judicious powerhouse of knowledge and ideation, an entrepreneur all envisioned to take every business the Fintech way. Please welcome Madhusudan R, co-founder at YAP. Hi Madhusudan, how are you?
Hi, Zarina. Good afternoon. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for being on the show. It was already a wonderful chat we had off record. So I said it is going to be interesting to have you and have all your thoughts and insights, on the Empowering Series today. So how have you been? How have you been holding up the past? So I've been asking our guests since the past few months how their months have been, but I think I should ask you how the year is coming along for you now.
Yeah, I think we kind of got used to, in fact, we went into a company-wide work from home like weeks before the country announced it. So we were better prepared in that sense. We tasted some of it a few months before it. But business-wise, we had, a few years back, India had a demonetization. So the business that we are in, which is in payments, demon had a big sort of run in back in 2016. That today looks like a trailer, and this is the actual movie, right? So we kind of took some time to reset and restart. But the last couple of months have been pretty good. I mean, we've been seeing the growth come back. A lot of the businesses kind of coming back. So we are adjusting to the new norm of hopping between Zoom calls and all the other networks that are available. The traffic jams have got replaced by network latency and bandwidth not being there. That's about it. Yeah.
Apart from that, on a personal front, the whole idea of working from home, an initial lockdown in the whole country and everybody just pausing and working as if, things don't move that slowly with us as human beings, as a human race, especially the working culture. So how did you land up embracing all of this?
Yeah, it's interesting because we actually, in the lockdown, we had almost doubled our headcount. We had added almost 40, we are 120 member team now. We added almost about 55 people in the past 4 or 5 months. And half the company we have not seen in person, right? So it's been a fascinating sort of time for us to actually assemble a team without actually, meeting them face to face, right? And it's kind of seemed to be playing out. Not that we had a choice, but I guess a few things that are still sort of unraveling is the fact that when you look at companies and there's the whole process of getting somebody is to sort of get them over, understand body language, and a whole bunch of other sort of non-textual sort of things, right? So those elements are not there. That is getting replaced by you probably look up for that person, on their social media, what they are sort of talking. And so those softer sides are getting replaced, not by choice, but I think it's just, happening to people, independently, right? Like you hear about someone doing a good job, intuitively you just go, find out on LinkedIn what they're up to, right? So that's getting actually mainstream, right? So you just end up doing that. So we kind of have been adjusting to this, new norm of working remotely, very well, right? I think it's just occurs to us when you look back in hindsight, you just feel it worked out well, and we are just taking the moment as it sort of comes.
Okay, that's wonderful. So that's on the professional aspect, Madhu. I believe that you're also a very good weekend chef. I'm sorry I had to bring that in.
Yeah, I think I kind of my wife is a yoga instructor. A few years ago, she used to have her weekend classes.
Okay.
So that, and I we have a we have a we have a son. So we kind of, the choice that we had was to starve or just have eat out every weekend, and
Right.
that's where I picked up this habit of doing, or cooking a meal, at least one day in a week, and that has just become like a habit that has got formed over the years, and nobody's complaining. So it's a great stress buster. It allows you to push yourself to see what you can create, and something that your folks would love,
Right.
and it's Instagram worthy thing to do, right? So you kind of don't travel out, so you can at least post food pics and get some likes going. Yeah,
Okay, that is wonderful actually. And I think people around there who are listening, they should probably imbibe this whole activity of probably making a meal once in a week. It's also Instagram worthy, like you said, Madhu. So I think it's a great thing to do.
yeah.
Well, tell us about how Yap actually started. I believe you're from Chennai, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think the way we are a 5-year-old business, but I think the whole starting up goes back to something that you want to do right from your childhood, right? So there's like a childhood dream, And I was raised in a in Chennai, and I was brought up in a neighborhood which had a lot of folks who were from the Marwadi community, so they're all businessmen, hardcore.
Right,
And when you sort of look at them as a community, they it's fascinating how they help each other and make sure that there's that whole bonding that is there in terms of how they if somebody comes from the village to set up a shop locally there, everyone go all out to make sure that the business is successful, right? I got
right,
fascinated with the sheer fact that one, it was liberating that you could be, in the driver's seat trying to build a business and do it all by yourself. And also the fact that you're able to get other people to get the same benefit, right? So it kind of, stayed with me, during my, college, and then onto my professional career as well, where I somewhere felt that the need to do something on your own, need to actually give back and create an ecosystem of entrepreneurs around you, really sort of fascinated me. And
hmm,
then when you're a part of a company, I always tell this to my team as well. There is always an expectation. There's always things that the company wants you to do, and it get measured on an annual basis. That's how the monetization models are built. That's how your appraisals are built.
hmm,
But it's always about what you extract as value personally for you, right? So if you're spending a good part of your active life in a company, what is it that you are getting as a ROI on that investment of time?
right,
And that led me to, actually, in every job that I took, I've always sort of tried to see what is it that I can get from this company in return at a personal level. And I had, over the course of time, I had like great bosses. I used to work for Citi, and then at Visa, where in roles where in Citibank, for instance, I was amongst a team of the brightest set of minds in the country. Most of them had great pedigrees, IIT, IIMs. Well, I never had the chance to study there. It does two things to you, right? One, it plays psychologically, where you feel that you are lost in that crowd, where a lot of people I've seen who tend to think that there is some level of superiority that these folks have,
right,
but generally most people tend to be nice. And in my Citibank role, it was actually a revelation for me in terms of how much I could learn from them, and be seen by our managers as on par, right? So that gap in terms of how it plays out in your mind, it is very important for you to actually not feel left out, and it leads a lot of people to a lot of things, right? You just feel dejected, you feel yourself out of place. So that kind of shaped me in terms of saying, this is about what I can get out of this company and with the people around. And 10 years out, some of the colleagues who worked with me in that organization ended up sort of applying, or sort of wanting to sort of work with us, right? So I think the whole thing came one full circle. And then when I was at Visa, Visa as a company, as you would all know, is a global sort of financial payments technology company. And when I looked at it, I said, what is it that I can do differently so that I don't get bored? I had just back then moved to Bombay with that role, and we kind of felt very out of place in that whole rat race. It's a very small team, but extremely sharp. You're all the time dealing with very senior bankers, and I just felt this is probably I was not cut out for it, right, in the first 6 months or so, right. And then I took it upon myself to say, what is it that I can extract out of this, right? That's when I started, engaging with my manager as well as the country manager at that point in time, and I carved out a role that I felt, good about, right? And that was like running a company within a large organization. It played out well, but unfortunately for me personally, it kind of meant that a lot of the people internally had like, they were just feeling uncomfortable with it, or they're just feeling, insecure. And I got to a point where, the monies that I was getting, I was not personally getting the gratification to say I'm delivering value to the company, right? That's when I said I should just move on. I spent like 5 years there, and this whole entrepreneurship was always playing in my mind. Back in 2012, 2013, you had a lot of action around payments as a startup idea, and the fintech action was just coming into an adult form in the country. That's when I said, let me, and then my colleague in Visa, who's also my co-founder, we used to, the only common connects that we had was both of us were from Chennai. So we had common things to sort of crib about, movies to talk about, and politics and all of that. So we ended up going to, our mid-afternoon sort of chai, to the tapri. And that's where we started, thinking about doing something, by stepping out of the company and on our own. And fortunately for us, it worked well, over the last 4 5 years.
So you're telling me that this is all over a cup of chai, tapri chai.
That's right. Yeah. So our company actually, got formed after a chai pe charcha, many chai pe charcha.
Lovely, lovely. So I guess the concept works for many or a few, but as long as you're persistent about it. So tell us more about YAP and what is it that YAP really does, and how is it, working, and what is the startup space like?
Yeah. So YAP is so we are a payments technology company. By that, what I mean is whenever you run a business and you want to offer some products which are on the banking or financial services side to your customers, you'll have to work with regulated entities. Like bank is a regulated entity. So you
Right.
go, talk to a bank and say, hey, I have a base of customers. Let's say you're a retail storefront, right? And you want to offer some payment products to your loyal customers. Then you have to make it work by talking to a bank, getting them to agree to your idea and start building that and all of that. So what typically happens is that banks, in their own scheme of things, because they are doing so many things, they have so many products to sort of manage and all that, they tend to not have the resources or the teams or the technology to actually help individual companies, right? They either tell you, this is our product, you can take it, this is the fee that it will attract, and you can use it and things like that, or they just outrightly not allow you to do. In a world that we are in today, we see more and more of the brands coming in and saying, we will offer products to you, right? Like a Google Pay. Google has nothing to do with finance, but everybody uses Google Pay, right?
Right.
Likewise, you have other examples. Airlines do co-branded credit cards. I'm sure, when Jet was there, most people used to have like a Jet Airways credit card, is
Yes.
because that financial services product adds affinity. It gives you miles so that you can spend on your holiday and things like that. So every brand is today gravitating towards offering money in some form or shape, right? It could be savings, it could be investment. So when these brands want to work, they need somebody to actually make it work, right? So we are that company that works with banks, works with these companies, and we sit in the middle and orchestrate that whole infrastructure and how the program can be run. So we are like the invisible hand behind many of the brand products that are out there in the market.
You're the ghostwriter of a lot of.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's very nice. And I think it's a growing market in that space. If you kind of look at how everything is becoming so digital and technology is taking over everything, specifically in the last few months also,
Yeah.
there's so much reliance on being able to do everything with that kind of mediation and process and programming. I'm quite sure that you must have been a handful through this entire phase and the pandemic.
Yeah.
So does that also mean that, when you're starting off, lovely, chai pe charcha business with a lot of experience and expertise along with it, naturally, there is a scope of ideation, but then there also is this whole phase where you come across a lot of challenges, and sometimes those challenges are ongoing in some way or the other.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So, Madhu, what are the kind of challenges that you faced in the business or while beginning, starting out? Because a lot of people out there, they start out, but a lot of them also give up halfway or while they're almost there because maybe they don't think it's working out. So, how do you handle challenges, and what are the challenges you faced?
Yeah, I think there are three parts to this answer, right? I mean, the one is the fact that who you are as a person and how do you prepare yourself for this, right? And I'll double click on this in a moment.
Hmm.
And then the second part is what is it that you're problem solving, right? So there's a whole business and an idea that is there. And the third part is the market readiness in terms of adapting to whatever you are sort of trying to build and sell, right?
Hmm.
If you look at the first part, and that's where a lot of companies are either too ahead of its time because the founder thinks hits an idea, they just without doing a lot of research or looking around whether such companies have been attempted or things like that, they just want to especially this happens especially in technology companies where an engineer gets an idea, he starts coding for it, right? uh,
Right,
so the first and the most important thing from an entrepreneur standpoint is to sort of actually get ready to ride that wave, right? So it all looks hunky dory from the outside, but it's a very a lot of people will sort of allude to this. It's a very lonely, even though you have co-founders. It tests your character in terms of it being a very lonely sort of journey, and you having to be responsible for everything, right? So whether it's customers, money, business, whatever that is. So you kind of have to prepare for, like in my own example, when I wanted to do this, I stayed cleared of all my EMIs. I foreclosed 2 years before I had even left my job, right? Because that financial commitment is what drives people crazy, right? You have to see results in 6 months, 1 year. It may take 5 years for you to see that result, right? And there are companies which have seen success after 20 years. So thereby, unless you are able to get ready for this, there is one at an individual level, and then you have a family that there is a certain lifestyle that you are sort of carrying. You have to get a complete buy-in from the family as well, right? Because if you're operating at a certain lifestyle, it might require you to forego some of it for god knows how many years, right? Not even months.
right.
So thereby it's important to actually get the family by your side in terms of what vision and how it could be different motivations for different people. It could be changing lives of people. Many companies go out and do societal good work, or it could be financially rewarding, right? 5 years out I might become a billionaire, so let's just in the short term we'll have to adjust. Or it could be something very different, right? You just want to have a lifestyle business where you are on your own and do some of these. So different people will have different motivations, but it's super important to have your family by your side to make sure that when I say family, it's your parents, it's your spouse, and for people who are married and things like that, right? So
Yes,
you really should ensure that your personal life doesn't get derailed because of the burn that you have to go through in your gig, right? That's super important. And once you are financially and from personal side, you are sort of sorted, it will never matter, right? Whatever hurdle that you face is just, you just are going to take it by the day. It just gets, very ugly when you have like bills to pay or EMIs are bouncing and you are not having enough cash flows. That's when it gets really, really, crazy. So my advice to a lot of folks who, are early companies is to stay clear of much as how they would like. And this goes back to my, roots where Marwadis don't borrow, right? They just take money from their friends and family and run that business. So that's one. The other thing which is very, very, specific to India is that if you look at any individual in their mid 30s or late 30s, right? A lot of entrepreneurs come into, starting up at that age.
right.
In India, a lot of these people have a very unique problem, which is to say, mid 30s is when you start getting in a typical company, you start getting a team. You have young kids, you have aging parents, right? Suddenly, the number of dependents on you actually grows 3x, right? Not just your spouse, but there are people who are, dependent on you. So the ability to manage that dependence, right? And these are different pressures, so, in your mind, is something that you need to prepare yourself for. It's not like I can give you a textbook and say, hey, go get ready, right? So you might have a very difficult, teammate, or you could have very demanding children, or whatever that is, right? Or on the personal side.
Right.
So a lot of the founders have to weigh in some of these elements, right? Healthy for me, fortunately, my parents have been healthy, so they have not. I've not spent one day, devoted to them in my last 5 years. I've just been lucky, and I keep thanking the God for that. So thereby, these are things that can, completely, come as a surprise, and from an unknown area, and derail the plan. So that getting to that state of mind is the number one sort of aspect, right? You could have a business idea, it doesn't work, you dunk that and move to a second one. But personally, being prepared for a long haul, which I would say, unless you're able to commit to like 7 to 10 years, you should never start up, right? It's not like, "Arey mera, dost kar raha hai, let me also give it a shot. I may make some quick buck." It is not happening. It can happen only in movies. Real
Mm.
world mein hota nahi, right? So I think so that's the first part. The second part is around business and what you are trying to do. You need to actually start looking at who are the people who can help you navigate that, right? When I say navigate, it could just be simply asking them whether it's a good idea, bad idea, ugly idea, right? You then have to be pragmatic about it in terms of hearing that feedback. People can, you should tell that, push people to actually tell you nasty things why it will not work, because everybody, will show niceties, right? They'll say, "Hey, it's a great idea, it will work," right? Unless you are, getting convinced, where you can do role reversal, right? You can be the bad cop and say that, this is your idea and I will, try and poke holes. You
Hmm.
have to do that at heart, right? From heart, and get people who can back you. Normally that doesn't happen, because culturally we are just nice to people. We don't, say bad things. So that again is an important area for you to get that business idea validated before you sort of jump in. The third dimension to it is more about market fit, which only after you put the product out in the market you will know, which is more driven by what kind of business you are in and how you execute, and a whole other variables that are there.
Right. I have to say that I really like the fact that you mentioned, making sure that you actually communicate your action plan to the family. I don't
Yeah,
think I've heard this one before, and I think, Madhu, that is so important, and it's so intricate when you're starting off on your own, or you are making plans which have a vision, or they have a break-even point a little later in time as compared to your lifestyles and the things that you have at the moment.
yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. Interestingly, when we started up,
Hmm.
the first thing that we noticed was that in our, corporate job, we had, our entire families were covered for insurance, right? The moment you
Yes.
leave that job, you realize that that's a big cost that is there. Insurance is for an untoward event. So
Hmm.
from our first day in our company, we had like every family covered entirely, right? Because you don't, just because somebody chose to work with you, it shouldn't happen that they put that, family in jeopardy. And I, we do talk to a lot of founders. We ask them these questions in terms of, have you guys covered yourself first, right? God forbid something happens, it should not be a bad decision that you took, that your family is suffering, for eternity, right?
Right.
So that's important.
It's a very futuristic thought. I think what's important is the core, the fact that you actually consider, and maybe this is what people should do when they're out and they're starting off on their own with a good plan or without one. They must have a conversation with their near and dear ones, especially a spouse, children, etc., so that they know what is in
Yeah,
store, even in terms of
yeah,
time, because you suddenly become so busy with work that you're missing in action for a lot of important events, important moments in each other's lives. And I think the whole concept of being able to communicate all of these things at an early stage, and then also kind of creating that ecosystem with the right, let's say, team, and preparing
yeah,
people around you, I think it's a wonderful thing to kind of do right at the initial stages of beginning a business and your
yeah,
entrepreneurship. So I think
yeah.
uh, that's a brilliant, brilliant piece of advice, Madhu. I hope people are listening in for this one. Madhu, there are a lot of different aggregators, and there are new services out there, and there are new mediators out there. What kind of differentiates Yap from competition?
There are two parts to this. One is the fact that we have, the way, we have been around for a while, so we kind of evolved with the ecosystem.
Hmm.
Today, we pride ourselves in what we call as, Lego banking, right? Which is, all of us have used Lego as a toy. as a kid, when you're given a box of Lego pieces, you kind of you might have a preference of certain colors, certain shapes. You tend to, as a child, tend to piece all of that together to get to some form, right? Either you follow the instructions in the kit, or you just go out. Most kids actually go out and build their own, right? So we have drawn an analogy to that, play, and said that we are replicating that whole Lego into the banking world, where we let companies, young companies, we treat them as kids, and we tell them that there are certain colors which are rules and regulations. There are certain shapes which are how you can operate, and what all the control mechanism. But it's left to you to sort of figure out how you want to piece all of this together, right? And we give you the instruction sort of booklet to create whatever you need to be created. So anecdotally, we're kind of saying that much like how you create, your creativity will lead to something looking good or bad. We can do the same thing in banking, and that has worked really well for us. We co-create with a number of fintechs and companies. That's the first part. The second piece is that when you start looking at a business, we don't go out and see what's in it for us. We actually help a lot of founders navigate this whole phase, right? Which includes a lot of unsolicited advice. We tell them that this is something that you guys should not be doing because we've seen people do and fail. So thereby, there's a lot of uh, love that sort of comes back from them. So they tend to tell people, and for a longest period of time, we never had like a sales organization. We had referral and word of mouth that helped us win new businesses. That has happened because we always put their whichever is the business, their interest ahead, and that kind of has worked well for us, right? The Lego banking theme kind of resonates with everyone. There's a kid in every person is what we are hoping for.
I love this whole banking idea. It's so thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's noteworthy. I haven't imagined a very, financially driven or technically driven business being able to think so creatively. So this is fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you.
And how about the whole relationship with employees? Because yes, of course, you keep the interest of your clients and the companies obviously for you. But what about the employees? What is your take on how one must deal with employees, especially where there is this new normal coming in, so to say, and the whole pandemic, and even otherwise, from a startup perspective?
So actually, it goes back to our where we came from, right? In the sense, when we started, we for the longest period of time, for the first 4 years, we never went out and raised capital, right? Which meant that we didn't do a lot of PR. We didn't, we were not in like newspaper first pages and all that. So a lot of people, we were a non-entity, right? So when you had to assemble a team, when you have banking services which are highly regulated and all, you need to have because when you deal with banks, you need to make sure that you are well resourced to make sure that you're able to meet their operational requirements and all. So the biggest challenge that we used to have in our early days was how do you get talent to come and work with you.
Right.
That had been our sort of biggest sort of challenge or impediment in our early days. And then we figured, how are other companies sort of cracking this code, right? There are a lot of businesses who are bootstrapped. Every Indian trader is a bootstrap person. And then we kind of looked at companies that are doing it at scale and doing it extremely well, right? So companies like Zoho, which is also a Chennai-based company, they're probably like a couple of $1 billion in value. They put a lot of thrust on how they treat their teams. As a case in point, they used to hire kids from right out of school, put them in a curriculum where they are geared for a job, and they give them and things like that, right? So we draw a lot of good stuff from some of these companies that where we felt they were doing it really well, right? And over a period of time, we got some of that as part of our organization as well. In the sense, we went out in the first couple of years, we went out and hired from very very small towns where for lack of a better opportunity, some of those kids never could construct a sentence in English, right? But we gave them responsibility. Many of them came out shining, right? And And the good thing with that is once you put people in responsible position where you give them trust, it may happen that they may fail on one or two things, they may break a few pieces, but the amount of trust they sort of give back is phenomenal, right? And in the whole sort of journey, this is something that we pride ourselves where we've had people mature over, we are like a 5-year-old company. In all, we would have hired like 100 people. We still have like 120 people in the roles, right? So barely people sort of move out of our company, and that's kind of been the case, right? That it becomes a very closely knit team, so to speak. And now there are folks who they sort of talk about that company, and there are their friends and their extended families who want to come and work with us and things like that. So we have kept the whole family vibe in the way we have built it in our early days, which meant that we didn't do like regular of the HR activity checkbox items, right? We never used to do these painting all of us in the same t-shirt and things like that, right? We really had like a team vibe that was there. I hope it's still there, right? Even when we are working remotely. And also, when we push people to actually start putting them in uncomfortable sort of situations, right? Basically telling them if somebody is in operations, move them into technology, and somebody in a technology, move them into, take them for sales call, so that they at the core as an individual they become like a they full rounded professional, whether they are with us or externally. And we have as a principle, we put sort of customer empathy at the center of all of what we do. Unless this person is able to, he or she is able to look through the prism of how we are seeing it, where it's not a defined one stream of activity, you just have to do operations. Unless you are putting in yourself in those different shoes, you'll never be able to appreciate what the other person is doing, right? The moment you start moving around as a role, you are able to better appreciate, so the empathy automatically sort of comes in, right? So it's normally in sort of mid-sized companies you will find that the tech team and the other business team or operations team are at loggerheads, right? Because it just got built that way. They all grew that way. There was never this, cross pollination that happened. We have tried to keep that rhythm, sort of going, and that has worked extremely well for us, I would say. And I should not be bragging about it, but but I think that it's working well for us.
No, but I think it's something that modestly you must brag about so more people can learn out of it,
Yeah,
frankly. To be honest, Madhu, I think attrition rates are something that every organization and every industry is always struggling with.
yeah,
So, having said that, the fact that you've nurtured people from the very nascent stages of them trying to become something and giving them that platform and that opportunity to showcase themselves, I think it's wonderful in itself.
yeah,
So, no wonder your team wants to stick around with you. And the fact that you mentioned empathy, empathy is something that seems so lacking these days. So you're speaking about it from not only a very cognitive space, but also from an emotional and compassionate space.
yeah,
I think that really changes the game when you're looking at running a business and being a co-founder or founding a company with that kind of empathy and compassion. I think it really changes the way people grow.
yeah.
So kudos to you for that. That's amazing. So, Madhu, is there any one belief that you really swear by?
Yeah, I think I had a question for you before I answer that, right?
Yeah, sure.
So as a as a life coach, right?
Mhm.
How have
Mhm.
you seen people evolve? I mean, this is like we are India is a point in time where there's super exuberance on this whole everybody wanting to start up, and a lot of mid-level corporate executives want to in their own segment that they are in, they have some idea, they want to sort of do this. Are you seeing this for real when you actually talk to people? Is that just a fad, or do you see this as a recurring theme over the last few years?
Right. So this I will answer as a leadership coach actually because that is where it's fallen.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah,
So I feel yes, there was a point in time where people took it up as a fad, because a lot of people were of this mindset that, hey, instead of working for somebody else, why don't we start off on our own? And there is a research in America which shows you that only 4% startups actually last over 5 years, and only about
Yeah.
10% last a decade. So, with time, I
Yeah.
think people have come to the realization that it is for some and it is not for some. So at this point in time, people who are getting in that space, Madhu, those are the people who genuinely, I would say an 80% of them are the ones who genuinely want to make it, and maybe a 20% is the one who doesn't know what is going to be next, and they will probably cross the bridge when they come to it. So there is a
Yeah.
change. There has been a bit of a shift in thought process and perspective there. However, I personally feel that, like for example, Madhu, when you've shared your story so far, the one thing I understand is you've been indulgent and ready to work for somebody, ready to take experience, ready to learn before you actually teach, before you actually
Yeah.
grow. And I think that is something that when people want to start out on their own, that is something they should definitely. I encourage people to definitely do that at least for a year of their life before they venture out on their own. Take experience, learn before you actually want to teach and grow. And maybe
Absolutely.
a lot of people, they're seeing the rise and fall in entrepreneurship and startups and people starting off, especially during the pandemic. You've realized a lot of things in terms of businesses.
Yeah.
They're shutting down
Yeah.
and disrupted in that sense. So yes, I think the game is changing, but people are getting slightly more serious, and they're weighing the pros and cons equally now as compared to before. It just seemed like start a business, that was it. But now there is more to it. There is more to it. So yes, it's kind of changing there.
It's interesting because we have in the last 6 months or so, we
Mm.
have seen almost we work with about 250 odd companies. We have seen 12-15% ballpark companies that have just gone out of business because of the pandemic, right? These are young companies, founders who had dreams for no for, like, I would say, act of God or act of China, that just kind of went out of business, right?
Yes.
So you just don't know where and what is going to sort of hit us, right? So that's where the working in a company sort of helps us to be prepared, in the sense you may not get the same level of execution depth, but at least that's the closest that you can get to the ring, right, in terms of how business world operates. And that's where we learn the ropes in terms of how we run the company. My one of my bosses, he always had this habit of, whenever we went on a joint call, let's say to a bank,
Mm-hmm.
right from the the CEO to the last man in the line who probably opens the door, he would always sort of pat on the back and have like a small conversation with him, right?
Right.
It used to fascinate me on two counts. One, it was not expected of him to do that, but as an individual, that person stood out in that the chaprasi who's actually opening the door. Nobody actually respects him, right? It's like your Munna Bhai story, right? So it kind of left a very, very deep mark in the way we operated when we started, right? Yeah, so I think the operating word that we have, been trying to, sharpen our focus on is around empathy in all of what we do. We just feel that everything sort of centers around that. If you are, empathetic to your team, to your customers, uh, it actually reflects in the business side as well, right? You might have a rough day, but by and large, if the organization demonstrates empathy, it can stand out, right? It can have, like, obviously there are a product cannot be bad. The empathy alone cannot win it, but it's a currency that can take you a long way. So that's what we believe personally.
Fantastic, Madhu. I think empathy is something that everybody needs to imbibe for sure. And it also kind of differentiates you from people around you. And more importantly, I think as a human race, if you don't have empathy, you don't have humanity. And all bases start there. So I think you guys are already on the right track, or you've been on the right track for a long time. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you did mention earlier there was a couple of little pieces of advice that you have kind of given to startups and entrepreneurs out there. I'd like to just know your
Right.
pearls of wisdom, maybe two or three little pearls of wisdom for not only founders and entrepreneurs, but people out there who are, struggling to find their motivation in today's time.
Yeah, I think so. What I have seen people, do, right, is that and it's particularly getting more evident in markets like India is that at some point everyone actually sort of raises to their level of incompetence, right? In the sense, not all of an organization's employees become CEOs. Somebody becomes unit head, somebody becomes a head of sales and things like that. Somewhere in your sort of career, you have to sort of take that sort of choice in terms of saying what is it that my inherent area of strength, and what is it that I have to rise to, right? In the US, you might find people doing the same job over for 20 years, and they're happy about it, right? So you might raise in ranks, you might get payroll benefits and all of that, but it's just that you keep doing the same thing over and over. In an aspirational market like India, where there is so much of abundance of opportunity, that is likely to happen in the next 5, 7, 10 years, right? So folks who are in their 20s, late 20s, by the time you hit your late 30s and 40s, you have to just be prepared for the reality that the stagnation will come, right? And you have two choices. One is to sort of say that it's okay, I'll handle it as it comes, or get prepared for it, right? You could update your skills, you could do things which will help you to maybe pivot into a new career path, or any of that, right? So it's important for us to in whichever business or segment that you're working in, have a dispassionate long-term view of where that business is going, where that company is going. Like, for example, 10 years back, telcos were a great business. 5 years ago, there were 10 companies. Today, there's only 2 companies that you can work in, right? So the companies will get disrupted, industries will get disrupted. So in whichever industry that we are in, we should just be mindful of the fact that are we likely to get disrupted? Are we likely to get redundant? And how do you prepare for that eventuality, right? And in a world that we are in, this is going to happen rapidly, right? It's not going to take decades to gather. It might happen in 1 or 2 years, right? Where you are completely left without any new skills that you have acquired. So my advice, would be to sort of keep an eye out, and make sure that you plan, like you break your sort of career itself into 5 years and have a plan for a 5 year forward, and keep executing on that.
That's brilliant. A partial something with a vision.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so every 5 years you put a 5 year plan to it. It can include a marriage, it can include a child, whatever that is, right? And have a balance to, on the professional side as well, right? You should get 2 promotions in the next 5 years, right? It's a good goal to have. If you don't do it in 3 years, do a course correction. Maybe you should look for another job and things like that.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Yes, I'm quite sure those little pearls of wisdom will go a long way with all our listeners out there. So, Madhu, we've come to the end of our segment, and I cannot let you leave this conversation without asking you a signature question. And that is, Madhu, what empowers you the most?
I think the way we are, looking, and this has evolved over a period of time. Today, the way I look at it is our ability to actually, help individuals to actually dream big, start on their own, and make this an epidemic, right, of sorts, where I have maybe 20 companies born out of people who are working with us, or people who are in my close circles, and they become job creators, right? And we are uniquely poised with our little success to actually be in the driver's seat to do that. So that is what we look forward to, waking up every day, where you can actually go out and help people become better, and may potentially start something on their own, become job creators. Yeah, that's what I would
Wonderful.
close with. Yeah.
That's an interesting source of empowerment for everybody. So, on that note, Madhu, I really, really thank you for being with us today and sharing such wonderful, valuable thoughts and pieces of advice. Your entire thought process, the whole idea of empathy, the whole idea of involving, communicating, growing together. I think it's a wonderful. I'm pretty sure YAP is a wonderful place to work at because of you. So, kudos to you. Congratulations on the wonderful work you're doing, and thank you for spending time for this conversation with me.
Thank you, Zarina. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation, and after a long time, I could sort of reflect back on. I just feel a little old today, but I really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah.
Oh, well, the idea is that when we talk about startups, we are never old, even if it's 15 years
For
old.
sure, for sure, yeah.
So don't have to worry about that. And yes, in the meanwhile, please continue and enjoy making those lovely meals for your family. Hope someday we get to eat some as well. So yes, have a lovely time and be safe and take care of yourself and all the very best for the future, Madhu.
Thank you, Zarina. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
If you liked this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to an amazing, awesome, excellent, extraordinary week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Intel, for supporting us. Great week on the network. If you haven't been listening, why haven't you been listening? You should be listening. Rohan Joshi was on Uncle Please Sit, discussed the toxicity of the Indian pop culture. Really fun conversation to listen to. Rajiv Samant, the founder of Sula Wines, was on Cyrus Says. Again, I think that was a fun conversation. Also want to call out the season finale of Yuddha. Yuddha is our military history podcast. Definitely do check that out. It's a really great listen. And finally, I want to just remind you all that, it's a dark time, but if you need a smile, go check out the Smile India podcast by Shifa Mehtra. It's in both English and Hindi, and I think that you will really enjoy the kinds of things that she's talking about there. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, the show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.